Hello, everybody, and welcome to Theology 101. Welcome to our Friday series where we are looking at pictures of faith from Hebrews chapter 11. Today we will look at how by faith Israel was delivered from Egypt into the promised land. Let's do a quick recap of where we are in the story of Exodus. After spending 40 years in the wilderness, Moses returns to Egypt and tells Pharaoh to let Israel go. Pharaoh ignores Moses' command because Israel was the workforce of Egypt. For Pharaoh to let Israel go will be like every American company giving up their workers away for free. This will ruin Egypt's economy. So one by one, God starts to attack the gods of Egypt through different plagues. For example, God attacked the Nile by turning it into blood since Egypt worshipped the Nile. Then God attacked the Egyptian goddess of fertility who had a head of a frog by using frogs to disrupt everybody's lives. Finally, God attacks Pharaoh himself since Pharaoh viewed himself as a god by killing his firstborn son. With the 10 plagues, God has made the same point. He alone has power and not the idols of Egypt. Finally, Pharaoh lets Israel go, but then in his anger, he decides to send an army after them to kill them. And even though Israel saw these 10 plagues up close, instead of being filled with faith in God, they are filled with fear as Pharaoh drew near with his army. Israel can hear the army coming towards them. Maybe they can even feel the vibrations of the thousands of chariots shaking the ground. They are trapped. On the one side is Pharaoh's army, but on the other side is the Red Sea. But it is at this point where God does an amazing miracle that the author of Hebrews described. By faith, the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. The text tells us that a strong east wind came and started to push the sea apart until everyone could see dry land. This is why the author of Hebrews says they crossed on dry land. They didn't walk through a stream or have to walk through water up to their waist. Instead, Israel saw walls of water on both sides of them while walking on dry land. Notice that the land wasn't marshy or wet, but completely dry, which allowed Israel to bring their animals and wagons across without sinking into the ground. There had to be a gap about a mile wide to accommodate 2 million people to cross. So the supernatural wind that came had enough force to push back the sea for a half a mile on one side and a half a mile on the other side. Now you might be thinking, it doesn't take faith to walk on dry land when you could see it with your eyes. Before the sea parted, Israel was afraid. So how can we say that Israel crossed the sea by faith if they were afraid? It is because faith does not mean the absence of fear, but to obey God even when you are afraid. Yes, Israel's faith was imperfect, but they did have enough faith to obey God even though they were afraid. By faith, Israel decided to take that first step on dry land even though they were afraid that they might sink. By faith, they walked on dry land all night until the morning, even though they were panicking, thinking that they didn't have enough time to outrun Pharaoh's army. The reason why I say that Israel crossed the sea by faith is because the Egyptians did the exact same thing, but with different results. The Egyptian army saw the sea separate and assumed they could cross the sea quickly on dry land with their horses. They were not crossing the sea by faith in God, but by assuming they could do it based on what they saw. As a result, the walls of water crashed down on the Egyptian soldiers, on all of them, and they died. Both Israel and the Egyptian soldiers did the same thing, but God saved Israel and not the Egyptians because Israel crossed by faith while the Egyptians crossed according to what they saw. Now the author of Hebrews fast forwards over 40 years. The reason why the author skips 40 years is because the generation delivered from Egypt did not walk by faith in the wilderness, so God doesn't allow them to enter the promised land. Instead, the next generation is called to go into the promised land, but to do so, they must go through Jericho. Having just crossed the Jordan River, Israel was now sandwiched between Jordan and Jericho. Jericho was a strong city because of its walls. Since it was the entry point of the southern area, it had to be able to withhold invaders. Before, Moses sent spies into Jericho to see how well guarded it was, and they came back from the report with fear in their bones because they saw how tall and strong everybody was. And when they saw the wall, they said that it was a wall that went up to heaven. But this new generation of Israel was marked by faith. Joshua, the leader who took Moses' place, sent out 2 spies who met a prostitute named Rahab. Jericho was afraid of Israel because they heard the plagues God sent to Egypt. So after receiving all the information they needed, it was time for Joshua to plan how they will overtake the city of Jericho to enter the promised land. It is at this point where God tells Joshua how they will conquer Jericho. You shall march around the city, all the men of war going around the city once. Thus shall you do for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, everyone straight before him. What? We're going to march around the wall once a day for 6 days, and on the 7th day we're going to march around the wall 7 times, and then we're going to shout, and all of a sudden the walls are just going to fall? I wouldn't blame the Israelites if they had heard this plan and dismissed it. This plan is going to require faith to execute, right? However, despite their doubts, we see that Israel did follow God's instruction. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. You can picture all the guards standing on the wall looking down on Israel and laughing. For 7 days, people witnessed Israel do nothing but march. But we see that this plan worked, and with the destruction of the outer wall, the rebels created an on-ramp to jump over the inner wall. But one part of the wall and one family escaped death, which is what we learned about last time with the faith of Rahab. Now, how does a wall just fall after marching and screaming? There is no other explanation except that God brought down this wall. With these 2 stories, we see 2 different sides of deliverance. Israel was delivered out of Egypt, and a generation later, Israel was delivered into the promised land. What was necessary for Israel to be delivered out of Egypt and into the promised land was courage. Several times throughout the book of Joshua, there's one phrase God repeats: be strong and courageous. Why? In order to live by faith, you need courage. It takes courage to follow God's commandments, especially when it doesn't make sense to us. It takes courage to walk across the sea and to march around the wall. But we can have courage because we have faith in the God who has the power to deliver us, just as he delivered Israel. If you want to study more about Hebrews 11, I'll leave a link to a recommended resource in the description box below. If you missed the last video about Rahab's faith, I'll leave a link here for you to watch. Until next time, see you.